What if I told you that one of the most sophisticated master classes in change management, human psychology, and, civic duty was written entirely about a piece of lost laundry? Like specifically a stray sock with googly eyes.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd on its face.
Right.
But when you look past the whimsical illustrations, you actually find a shockingly accurate mirror of how human beings behave under pressure.
Yeah.
And, well, how genuine leadership actually functions when the traditional rule book is just thrown out the window.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so glad you are joining us because our mission today is to analyze an excerpt from a children's book called The Mayor of Buttonville.
Yeah, specifically a story titled The Sock Who Ran the Town.
Exactly. And our goal here is to show you how this, seemingly simple narrative offers incredibly deep insights into how we navigate chaos, how we organize our teams, and really how we solve problems in our own lives.
It's fascinating because the author uses the extreme innocence of a child's story to strip away all the complicated, self-important layers we usually attach to governance and business.
Which leaves us with the raw mechanics of human collaboration.
Exactly.
So let's set the scene for you. We are in the little fictional town of Buttonville, and the inciting incident of our story happens when a bright red sock falls out of a moving laundry basket and lands just plop smack in the middle of the town square.
And this isn't just a generic gym tube sock, right?
Oh, no! This is Sammy. Sammy has googly eyes, a tiny bow tie, and a single blue stripe. And his very first action is to politely introduce himself to a bewildered baker who is just, staring at this talking piece of cotton on the cobblestones.
Which is such a great detail because the baker's reaction is the natural human response to the completely unexpected.
Yeah, just total shock.
Right. But Sammy establishes something vital in that very first interaction. By simply saying, "Hello, my name is Sammy," he immediately de-escalates the weirdness of the situation.
He sets a baseline.
He does. He sets a baseline of clear, unthreatening communication.
Which really brings us to the central question of this deep dive. How on earth does a literal piece of laundry end up running a municipality?
And, more importantly, what can a talking sock teach you about navigating your next chaotic family meeting or a really disorganized project at work?
The answer to that starts with an immediate, massive crisis. Almost the second Sammy arrives, Buttonville is hit with a profound power vacuum.
Yeah, the town's mayor abruptly announces he is going on vacation. Just out of nowhere.
There's no ramp-up, no transition period at all.
Nothing. He just stands in the square and declares, "We need someone to help the town for one day." And then he just vanishes.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because before we even look at how the townspeople react, I really have to push back on the premise of this mayor.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Like, what kind of leader just walks out without a succession plan? If a department head at your job just stood up on a Tuesday, yelled, "Hey, can someone cover my shifts?" and drove to the airport, it would be administrative malpractice.
Oh, 100%.
It is so reckless.
It is incredibly reckless. And that recklessness is the spark that ignites the whole narrative. By providing, zero framework for the transition of power, the real mayor has triggered a collective panic response.
Yeah.
Because when formal structures vanish overnight like that, human communities don't typically sit down and draft a logical transition document.
No, they definitely do not.
They revert to their most basic survival instincts, which, in a social setting, usually manifest as pure ego.
Pure, unadulterated ego. The townspeople just immediately descend into a screaming match.
Oh, it's total chaos.
The square turns into a mob. And the arguments they make for why they should be given executive power are completely absurd. The text gives us two specific quotes. One person yells, "I make the best muffins," and another person counters with, "I have the biggest hat."
It's hilarious, but it is a brilliant distillation of how people behave during a crisis.
How so?
Well, when there is no clear rubric for who should lead, people panic. And they start projecting the traits they are personally proudest of, even if those traits have absolutely nothing to do with the problem at hand.
Right, like baking muffins is a great skill, but it doesn't translate to municipal governance.
Exactly.
It reminds me of those dysfunctional group projects we all had in school, You sit down to figure out how to structure a presentation, and instead of pitching a practical solution, someone tries to take charge by mentioning they got an A in a completely different class.
Oh, yeah. Or they just argue the loudest.
Right. They pitch their ego, not the fix. They're essentially shouting, "I have the biggest hat."
And that shouting creates this massive feedback loop of escalating tension. Nobody is actually listening to anyone else. They are only waiting for their turn to speak.
Which is where Sammy comes in.
What's fascinating here is Sammy's intervention. Because he is a complete outsider. He has zero ego invested in Buttonville's social hierarchy.
He doesn't bake muffins.
He certainly doesn't own a hat. And the text notes that Sammy simply raised his little sock toe and suggested, maybe we should vote.
I love that. He doesn't yell over the crowd at all. While everyone else is screaming until they are red in the face, Sammy just quietly raises a toe.
And that quietness is a recognized de-escalation tactic. If someone is shouting and you shout back, you basically validate the volume of the argument.
You're matching their energy in a bad way.
Exactly. By speaking softly and raising a toe, which is a physical gesture of asking for permission to speak, Sammy forces the room to quiet down if they actually want to hear what this bizarre newcomer has to say.
That's a really good point.
Furthermore, the solution he offers completely shifts the cognitive state of the town.
Because he introduces a system?
Yes. He shifts them from an emotional, combative state, where they're fighting over arbitrary merits, into an analytical, structured state. Democracy.
A vote requires you to stop talking about yourself and start considering the collective.
Precisely. The maker says, that's a good idea. The tension breaks, they hold a vote, and to everyone's absolute shock, Sammy the Sock wins the election.
Which is such a great moment because Sammy himself is entirely surprised. He's like, me, mayor.
Yeah, he wasn't campaigning at all.
He didn't want the job. He just wanted to fix the broken meeting. He facilitated a solution, and the community rewarded him with the leadership role. But, you know, winning the job and actually doing the job are two very different things.
Oh, absolutely. The transition from acquiring power to actually wielding power is where most novice leaders stumble. And the story illustrates this beautifully with a physical metaphor.
Oh, the hat.
Yes. Once Sammy is elected, the townspeople take the real mayor's shiny hat and place it on Sammy's head. But Sammy is a tiny sock.
So the hat is massively oversized.
It's huge on him. It immediately falls down. It completely covers his googly eyes.
It plays out as physical comedy, but I couldn't help but wonder about the imagery there. Is the author telling us that traditional, heavy-handed leadership just doesn't fit a collaborative personality?
I think it goes even deeper than that. The shiny hat represents the town's historical expectation of what a leader should look like.
Flashy, top-down, dominant.
Right. But when Sammy tries to wear someone else's expectations, it literally blinds him. He can't see the town, and he can't see the problems in front of him.
So what does he do?
Well, Sammy's first actual executive decision is realizing that he cannot operate under the old symbol of ego. So he discards that hat.
He takes it off so he can actually see. And that clarity allows him to launch into a highly effective three-point action plan. We can call it the Sammy method.
I like that. This is the Sammy method.
And his first stop is internal organization. He heads straight to the Buttonville Public Library. And the text tells us the core issue here is that the books are all mixed up. Total disorganization.
Right.
Now, Sammy suggests a specific system to the librarians. He tells them to sort the books by color and size.
A suggestion that usually makes book lovers completely twitch.
Oh, I am absolutely pushing back on Sammy here. As someone who spends far too much time in bookstores, sorting books by the color of their spine and how tall they are, rather than by genre or author, sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It does sound chaotic.
That is interior decorating, not information science. How does that possibly help a library function?
Well, if we look at it through the lens of traditional library science, it is a terrible idea. But leadership isn't about applying a theoretical best practice from a textbook.
Okay, fair.
It's about tailoring a system to the specific psychology of the people who actually have to use it. Think about what we already know about the townspeople of Buttonville.
Well, they are incredibly superficial. I mean, their primary argument for who should rule the town was based on who wore the biggest hat.
Precisely. You have a highly visual, aesthetically driven community. If Sammy walked in and tried to impose a complex, alphanumerical categorization system, like the Dewey Decimal System,
They hate it.
he would introduce massive cognitive friction. The townspeople wouldn't understand it, they would get frustrated, and the library would remain a mess.
I see.
Sammy recognizes how his community actually processes information. By sorting the books by color and size, he provides a highly intuitive visual framework that instantly makes sense to a visually driven populace.
Wow. Okay, so he isn't really organizing the books. He is organizing the people's relationship to the books.
Exactly.
And the text does say that soon the bookshelves looked wonderful, which completely aligns with their visual metric for success. That is brilliant. It's meeting your team exactly where they are.
It's all about removing the friction between the user and the environment. But, organizing static objects indoors is one thing. The second point of the Sammy method takes us out to the park.
Right, where he faces a much more difficult challenge, motivating an unmotivated public to do physical labor.
A classic leadership hurdle.
The park's infrastructure is failing. Specifically, the playground swings are incredibly squeaky and broken down. Now, a traditional manager, someone who loves to micromanage, would probably grab a toolbox and an oil can, march over to the swings, and fix them by themselves to prove how capable they are.
And if Sammy did that, he would immediately become a bottleneck.
Yeah, he'd be doing all the work.
He would position himself as the town janitor, and the townspeople would just sit on the grass and watch him work. Instead, the text explicitly states that Sammy organized a team to clean and fix them.
He builds a task force. But how does a talking sock get people to give up their afternoon to do manual labor?
By understanding the psychology of collective ownership. There is a well-documented cognitive bias called the IKEA effect.
Oh, like the furniture store.
Exactly. It dictates that human beings place a disproportionately high value on things they partially create or maintain themselves.
Because they put the work in.
Right. If the mayor fixes the swings, it's the mayor's park. But by providing the organizational framework and empowering the citizens to do the actual tightening and oiling, Sammy transforms those swings from a public utility into a shared community asset.
That's a huge shift.
It really is. When people invest their own sweat into a project, they stop taking it for granted.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've seen Sammy handle internal organization at the library and public works at the park, but his third stop takes us straight into the private sector.
The bakery.
Yes. He walks into the local bakery, and he is faced with a localized economic crisis. The baker has a classic supply and demand imbalance. His inventory of cookies is incredibly high, but he has 0 customers.
The poor baker is just sitting alone in a shop full of baked goods. It's a total failure of consumer engagement.
So what does Sammy the Red Sox suggest? He tells the baker to start giving away free cookie samples.
A bold move.
And the result is immediate. By the end of the page, there is a line of happy customers wrapped entirely around the block. But why does that work so fast? I mean, giving away your product when you are already struggling seems like a fast track to bankruptcy.
Well, it comes down to understanding perceived risk and the human reciprocity loop.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Let's look at the baker. We know from the town square incident that the baker genuinely believes in his product. His campaign slogan was literally, "I make the best muffins." So the problem isn't that the cookies taste bad.
Right.
The problem is a psychological barrier.
The customers are hesitant.
Yes. For a consumer in Buttonville to walk in and buy a cookie, they have to risk their money on an unknown experience. That psychological risk creates friction.
So the free sample removes that.
Completely. It lowers the barrier to entry to absolute zero. But more importantly, when someone hands you something of value for free, it triggers a powerful, hardwired psychological response to return the favor.
The reciprocity loop.
Exactly.
If you give me a delicious cookie for free, I feel a subtle social obligation to buy a muffin, or at least come back tomorrow and spend some money.
You feel like you owe them, even in a small way.
Sammy didn't change the product at all. He just removed the psychological risk of trying it. That is wild. He solved a taxonomy issue, an infrastructure issue, and a localized economic stall all before dinner.
And he did it entirely by identifying friction points and removing them. Which really brings us to the sunset of this 24-hour administration.
Yeah, the transformation of Buttonville is complete by the end of the day. The entire town is smiling, the systems are working smoothly, and the baker, the exact same man who was shouting about his muffins that morning, publicly declares Sammy the best mayor ever.
And Sammy's reaction to this praise is incredibly telling. He blushes, adjusts his little bow tie, and reveals his leadership secret out loud to the crowd. He says, "I just listened and helped."
I just listened and helped. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Because when I read that line, I realized it completely flips our standard definition of leadership.
It really does.
Most of the time, whether we are managing a team at an office, leading a volunteer group, or, even just trying to get our kids out the door in the morning, we think leadership means being the engine. We think we have to have all the answers, generate all the momentum, and pull everyone else along behind us.
And that approach is exhausting. It usually leads straight to burnout or resentment.
Yeah.
What Sammy proves is that a truly effective leader isn't the engine. They are the lubricant.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Sammy didn't categorize a single book. He didn't turn a single wrench on the swings. And he didn't bake a single cookie.
He just facilitated.
Right. He listened to the people who were already doing the work, identified what was holding them back, whether it was a confusing system, a lack of shared ownership, or consumer friction. And he simply removed the obstacle.
He enabled the work to be done. And, the aftermath of Sammy's term is just as important as the term itself, because the next morning, the real mayor finally returns from his incredibly poorly planned vacation.
The guy who caused this entire mess wanders back into town.
Exactly.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, historically, when an interim leader is wildly successful, the return of the legacy leader causes massive organizational friction.
Because the interim leader doesn't want to give up their new power?
Right. And the legacy leader feels incredibly threatened.
Yeah.
But that dynamic completely fails to materialize in Buttonville. The real mayor hears about all the wonderful things that happen, and instead of feeling threatened, he offers Sammy a permanent role as his official helper.
And Sammy accepts it instantly. He says, I'd be honored. He doesn't try to stage a coup. He doesn't demand that they hold a new election so he can take the top job permanently. He completely rejects power just for the sake of power.
Because Sammy understands that genuine influence doesn't actually require a title. He is perfectly content being the official helper because that role gives him the latitude to continue doing the only thing he actually cares about.
Which is identifying problems and facilitating solutions.
Exactly. He doesn't need the shiny hat to be effective.
And the town itself doesn't just say, oh, thanks for the help and go back to their old ego-driven ways. They actively institutionalize Sammy's lessons. They create a brand new town holiday called Sock Day.
I love Sock Day.
It becomes an annual celebration where everyone in Buttonville wears silly socks.
And that is exactly how you make a cultural shift permanent.
Yeah.
You cannot just tell a group of people to change their behavior. You have to tie that new behavior to a memorable physical ritual.
It's brilliant. Before Sammy arrived, the cultural touchstone of Buttonville was shouting and posturing, I have the biggest hat.
Right.
After Sammy, their cultural touchstone is a silly sock. The sock becomes a physical reminder of humility, listening, and the surprising idea that anyone, even someone very small and unassuming, can change the entire direction of a community if they focus on collaboration instead of domination.
In 24 hours, they didn't just fix a library in a park, they completely rewrote their societal DNA.
It is genuinely wild when you take a step back and look at it. We took a short story about a piece of talking laundry with one blue stripe, and we found a comprehensive guide to systems thinking, de-escalation, and human behavior.
It really is a masterclass.
So to distill all of this down for you, the core takeaway from today's deep dive is that true problem solving is fundamentally not about having the loudest voice in the room.
No, it's not.
It is not about possessing the shiniest title or asserting your ego to force people into line. Real transformative leadership is about having the humility to listen to the people around you, the insight to tailor your systems to how humans actually behave, and the willingness to just quietly remove the obstacles standing in their way.
It requires an incredible amount of self-awareness to step back and ask, am I trying to be the hero here, or am I trying to be the helper?
Yeah.
As we saw in Buttonville, choosing to be the helper is consistently the most effective way to generate lasting results.
Exactly, which brings me to a direct challenge for you. The next time you find yourself staring down a disorganized project at work, or you're stuck in a chaotic family argument that is just going nowhere, pause for a second.
Take a breath.
Take a hard look at your own behavior. Ask yourself, are you trying to cram the big, shiny hat onto your head? Are you just shouting about your own muffins to prove you are right? Or are you willing to be the helpful red sock?
That's the real question.
Are you willing to quiet down, raise a toe, and help build a framework where everyone else can succeed?
It is a difficult shift to make, especially when our instincts tell us to take control. But the relief that comes from letting go of that ego is just immense.
Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder today. Think about how quickly Buttonville transitioned from a mob to a functioning, happy society. It's a completely chaotic, deeply flawed community could be entirely transformed in a single day, not by replacing the people, but simply by changing how they listen to each other and how they made decisions. What other broken systems in your own life are just waiting for a simple collaborative approach to finally run smoothly?
It really highlights how much unnecessary friction we tolerate in our daily lives, simply because we've never thought to question the system we're using.
It certainly does. So the next time you drop a single sock on the way to the washing machine, don't just sigh and view it as an annoyance. Look at that stray piece of laundry and remember that sometimes the most profound solutions to our biggest, messiest problems come from the most unassuming places. You just have to be willing to listen.